show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez, you may continue with cross-examination.
Sir, isn't it true that on a separate occasion you actually provided the defendant with a gift?
No.
Well, sir, do you remember providing her with a book called Erroneous Zones?
Yes.
And that was something that you provided to her, right?
It was mailed to her, yes.
Which means you provided it to her, correct?
Yes.
And you provided it to her because at that point you believed that she was depressed, right?
No.
Well, let's take a look at what your testimony was. See if this refreshes your memory. This is Exhibit 532. Take a look at the highlighted portion.
Yes, that is what I said, but actually that book is not...
Sir, that was the question. Isn't it true that you said that the reason you provided it to her was because she was depressed?
I said this here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You're conducting an evaluation at this point, correct?
Yes.
And providing an evaluation, as part of providing this evaluation, you're also providing a self-help book, right?
Yes.
And this self-help book talks about positive and practical advice for breaking free from the trap of negative thinking and enjoying life to the fullest, right?
Yes, that was for her low self-esteem.
Right, and this is by somebody named Dr. Wayne, or written by somebody named Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, correct?
Yes.
It also talks about if you're plagued by guilt or worry and find yourself unwittingly falling into the same old destructive patterns, then Erroneous Zones is the book for you, right?
Yes.
How is providing a self-help book really doesn't come under the auspices or under the coverage, if you will, of an evaluation, does it?
Not necessarily.
Well, no, not necessarily means it doesn't, right?
No.
And but you were there to try to assess her or evaluate her as it pertained to this particular case, right?
Yes.
And you would agree that if you were there to do that, and now you're trying to help her, there seems to be a little bit of the blurring of the lines there, don't you agree?
No, I don't.
Well, on the one hand, you want to help her, don't you? By giving her that self-help book, yes or no?
Yes, it wouldn't be bad. Yes, I helped her.
And on the other hand, you're to provide an impartial evaluation in this case, right? That's what the code says, right?
I didn't read the book to her. I sent her the book.
Right. But you were the one that actually provided it to her so that she could read it, right?
Yes, she was unable to get it on her own.
I'm not asking you whether or not she could get it on her own. The fact that she couldn't get it on her own, that made you upset enough to go out and buy it for her, right?
No, it didn't make me upset. I did what I did for many people and recommended
Well, I'm not
a book.
asking about many people. I'm asking about this particular case. Because you said that she couldn't get it, you went out of your way to get it and then send it to her, right?
Correct.
That required you to go buy the book, right?
Yes.
That required you to put it in whatever container there was and mail it to her, right?
No, I ordered it online.
You ordered it online. Once you received it, it went to her, correct?
It was sent directly to her through Amazon.
And when you ordered it online, that's with money coming out of your pocket, right?
Yes.
So now, not only are you sending her something, you're in a sense giving her money, aren't you?
Didn't look at it that way. I gave her a book.
Well, you're not looking at it that way, but that's what happened. You gave her money, and you gave her a book that cost you money, right?
Yes.
How much did that book cost you?
$9.
So here you are buying her a gift that's $9, right?
No, it was not a gift.
Oh, did she give it back to you?
She offered it back to me.
No, I'm not asking you if she offered it back to you. She never gave it back to you, right?
I didn't ask for it back.
Did I ask you whether or not you asked for it back?
So what are you asking?
I'm asking you whether or not isn't it true that she never gave it back to you, right?
She offered it back to me.
I'm not asking you whether or not she offered it to you. You understand that's not my question. You understand that, right?
Yes.
My question is, isn't it true that the book was never returned to you?
Correct.
And So you did this because you believed, or for whatever reason, you started to like her, right?
No,
Oh, so you dislike her.
I didn't say that either.
So you do like her then?
I can't answer that question, true, yes or no.
Well, why not? You spent how many? You went to see her on 12 separate occasions, right?
Depends what you mean by like.
I'm asking you, isn't it true that you went to see her on 12 separate occasions,
As
right?
part of my role to evaluate her, yes.
Yes or no? You did go see her on 12 separate occasions, correct?
Yes,
And you spent many hours with her, right?
yes,
And you talked about a variety of things, right?
yes,
You spoke about her relationship, right? With Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
right? You spoke about previous relationships, right?
yes,
And you spoke about some sexual issues that were involved with her and Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
You spoke about a lot of things during those 12 visits, right?
right.
How many hours did you spend with her?
Between 25 and 30 hours.
And during that time, you're saying that it was just a mere passage of time, it wasn't because you liked her, that you decided to get that book for her?
Typically, when
Yes
I
or
had...
no? Is that why you decided to get her the book?
Could you repeat your question again?
Isn't it true that even after all this time and after all these visits, the reason you got her this book, you're saying is just because there was no reason?
There was a reason.
And the reason was that you wanted to give her something, right?
No.
Well, you did give her something, didn't you?
Yes.
And there is a code of ethics, correct?
Yes.
And that code of ethics prohibits you from providing gifts to somebody like the defendant, doesn't it?
It wasn't a gift.
Sir, isn't it true that it went over and it got to her, didn't it?
She was suicidal at the time.
I'm not asking you whether or not she was suicidal, right? Am I asking you that?
No, you're not.
And if she was suicidal, you're not the treating physician, are you?
I'm not treating her.
Well, if she was suicidal, it was somebody else's responsibility to take care of it, right?
Judge, objection. Can we ask the state not to yell at the witness? It's not necessary. Please.
You may continue.
You were not the treating psychologist, right?
That's correct.
Somebody else was where she was residing, right?
I don't know.
You're not familiar, we've been told that she was at the jail. You're not familiar with the care that's psychological care that's provided in a jail?
We never talked about treatment for her.
Sir, you're telling us that as you sit here today, you are not familiar with the care that's provided by the Maricopa County Jail?
I am familiar, but I don't know.
So that's my question. Yes or no, you are familiar, right?
Not with every aspect, no.
Well, you're familiar with when there's a issue of suicide, you know what what is required of you at that point, isn't there?
To some degree. I'm
Well,
not
no,
sure
you're the psychologist who knows the rules, right?
Yes, most of them.
Well, with regard to the fact that somebody is suicidal, you don't just, because as a psychologist, if you take that threat seriously, you don't just walk away. If it were just a patient that you were treating, you would make arrangements, wouldn't you?
Of course.
You would, if necessary, you would call the police, right? Right?
Well, if there was an imminent threat,
Sure, you would call the police, right?
yes.
And in this particular case, you told us that you thought the defendant was suicidal, right?
She was telling us that she was
No,
going to kill herself.
Sir, now you're changing the story because now you're saying she was telling you.
Objection to the mischaracterization of changing the story.
Sustained.
Sir, didn't you tell us just minutes ago that she was suicidal?
She
Didn't you?
told us she was suicidal.
I understand that's what you're saying now. I'm asking you to think. You don't have any memory problems, do you?
No.
I'm asking you to think back to maybe 5 minutes ago. And 5 minutes ago, isn't it true that you told us, when I was asking you about the gift, you told us, well, she was suicidal. Do you remember that spontaneous statement coming from you?
Yes, but I didn't mean that she was going to kill herself right there. She had told everyone.
Sir, I'm asking you if you remember the statement, yes or no.
You're not allowing me to explain this.
All right, counsel, one at a time. The court reporter can only take one person speaking at a time. Dr. Samuels, you may complete your response. Objection sustained. You may continue.
Go ahead.
Repeat your question, please.
Isn't it true, sir, that with regard to this issue involving the suicide, you told us previously that, quote, or words to that effect, that she was suicidal when we were discussing the gift? Do you remember telling us that? Yes or no?
Yes.
And if you did believe that she was suicidal, you had a duty then, at that point, to notify somebody, didn't you?
Yes, her attorney was informed.
But you also had a duty to let other medical or psychological health care workers know about this, right?
My only contact with Ms. Arias was through the attorney. I don't have contacts in the jail, and I don't have any authorization to contact anyone in the jail.
So you're saying that with regard to this particular situation, if a person's unrepresented and they tell you that they are suicidal, what you are going to do is walk away because you have no contacts in the jail.
Objection relevance.
Overruled.
Is that what you're saying?
I'd like to explain what the word suicidal meant in this particular context.
Sir, you used the word, didn't you?
I did.
That's all I want. And when somebody is suicidal, isn't it true that the guidelines require you to make a telephone call or let somebody else know, right?
Suicidal, the word suicidal was my abbreviation and my shorthand for explaining the fact that Ms. Arias had told me that she had been planning to kill herself prior to her arrest and even during her incarceration. That's what I used when I wrote suicidal. That was my note. Those are the words that I used.
And you didn't inform anybody in the jail to give them a cautionary note that you believed, based on your conversations with her, that she was suicidal, right?
I contacted her through the attorney, which is all of my contacts to the jail are done through the attorney.
Sir, I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking whether, isn't it true, that you didn't tell anybody in the jail that you believe that this individual was suicidal?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
No, I did not contact anyone within the jail.
So you have this, what appears to be a relationship with this individual that you feel is appropriate that you buy her at least one gift, correct?
I bought her a self-help book.
You bought her a book, which is a gift, correct?
Well, I don't characterize it that way, but you may.
Well, no, I'm asking whether, we've talked about this, you paid for it, right?
Yes.
You never got it back, right?
Right?
And it was for a purpose that you believe was to help the defendant, right?
Yes.
And so if you're now helping the defendant, you're there assisting her, aren't you?
I did not conduct therapy.
I'm not asking you if you conducted therapy. I'm asking, the question is, isn't it true that you were then there to assist her? You are assisting her, aren't you? By giving her this book, right?
Okay?
Is that a yes?
Yes,
No, not I guess. Isn't that a yes?
yes.
And when you gave her this book, your expectation was that she would get better from whatever problem you perceived, right?
My expectation was that she would read the book.
Right. And the reason you wanted her to read the book was so that she could address in a meaningful fashion whatever issues you saw.
Yes,
And that's to help her, right?
yes.
And that is the problem. That creates an issue of your objectivity in this case, doesn't it?
I didn't think so.
I know you didn't think so, but on the one hand, you can see that you are helping her to get better, and on the other hand, you have to be impartial, right?
Yes.
And that creates an ethical dilemma for you, doesn't it?
Well, it didn't at the time, and it's something that I tended to routinely do, so I didn't see it as an ethical dilemma.
You didn't see it as an ethical dilemma, but you can see that there's an appearance here that you're trying to help her, right?
Yes, from your perspective, yes.
Not from my perspective, from anybody's perspective. Isn't it true that from anybody's perspective, you are trying to help the defendant get better with regard to whatever issue she has?
Objection, speculation is what other people may think.
Overruled.
Could you repeat your question?
Isn't it true that from whatever perspective is taken, you are helping the defendant?
Yes, by providing her with the book, yes.
And so then that creates this issue that may affect or indicates that it may affect the way you view your evaluation in this case, doesn't it? There's that appearance.
No, it does not.
There is no appearance of that here at all.
Well, there may be an appearance to you, but
No, I'm not asking to me, sir. I'm asking,
Objection to let him finish the answer that he had. There may be an appearance to you, but, and then he was interrupted.
Sustained. You may finish
Go
your
ahead.
response.
it may appear that way to you, but based upon her low self-esteem and the fact that she was threatening to harm herself, or was at least contemplating harming herself, I felt that by providing her with that book, it would allow my evaluation to go on.
and so it's better for you to provide her with a self-help book, in your perspective now, right, as opposed to mine, than to go to the authorities and say, there is this bigger issue of threatened suicide. That's what you believed.
That was communicated through her attorney.
Sure. That's what you believe.
Yes.
Sir, one of the things that you told us about was this issue that you had in New Jersey. Do you remember talking to
Yes.
the defense attorney about
Yes.
that? And you said, well, when I was here in Arizona, there was some sort of appeal or some sort of, I don't know, some proceedings, and you seemed to indicate that whatever happened in New Jersey really was no big deal.
No, what I said was that relative to Arizona, they reviewed the entire case, and I was exonerated by a vote of 13-0.
So you were exonerated by Arizona, which indicates that, from your point of view, that you did nothing wrong in New Jersey, right?
No,
And in fact, didn't you sign an agreement with the state of New Jersey agreeing to desist and ceasing from crossing boundaries with clients and entering into relationships which may create conflict of interest with the client?
and that had to do with the bartering issue.
Yes or no? Did you enter into that agreement?
Yes.
And that's the same kind of conduct that we have here, because now you've crossed a boundary involving the defendant, haven't you?
No, I have not.
So during this whole time that you, and with regard to this issue involving what happened in New Jersey, you indicated that you paid a fine, right?
Yes.
It was $2,500, right?
Yes.
In addition to paying the fine of $2,500, you said that was all that was involved. There was more that was involved in this, wasn't there?
I had to read a book.
Pardon?
I had to read a book.
Well, isn't it true that you had to successfully complete continuing education concerning ethics and boundary issues?
Yes.
And it indicated further that these courses should be completed within 6 months of the entry of the consent order. Isn't that what you had to do?
Which was resolved by reading a book and taking the test.
And this continuing education could occur either in New Jersey or Arizona, correct?
Correct.
An evaluation such as the one that you conducted is actually a sort of a two-pronged approach, isn't it?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, you do what is called an interview, a clinical interview, right? That's
Yes.
correct? That's one big area, correct?
Yes.
That was part of visiting her in wherever she was and talking to her, right?
Yes.
And this is the one where you previously testified that you would sit there and you would try to take notes as quickly and as accurately as you could, right?
Yes.
You don't tape record, right?
Never, no.
You would agree, though, that tape recording is probably more accurate, correct?
Probably more accurate.
And in addition to that approach, in addition to that, there's something else that you do, and that is you administer tests, right?
Yes.
And one of the tests that you administered was this PSD, right?
Yes.
What does PSD stand for?
Well, it refers to
No, without referring. Can you
Yeah.
just, to any materials?
It refers to the post-traumatic stress inventory.
Is that the exact name of that test, or is that something that you use?
Well, it's
Why don't you go, hold on.
Post-traumatic stress
Sir, hold on.
inventory, PDI.
All right, you looked at something when you gave us the name. So what is it that you're looking at to give us that name?
The manual
All
that has
right.
the exact name.
Okay,
Post-traumatic stress scale, diagnostic scale, that's what it is.
How many times have you administered that test?
Probably 15 times.
And what you said to us was that you actually scored that test yourself, right?
Yes.
And this test, because you seems to have only administered it 15 times, you're having trouble with the name, right?
Oh, well, yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes and no, right. Yes, post-traumatic stress diagnostic scale. It's PDS, but it leaves out the S in the thing, so I was thinking PSDS, but it's post-traumatic stress diagnostic scale, PDS.
Right. And this fact that you can't even remember the title seems to indicate that you're really not familiar with this particular test, right?
I use it
Well, you've used it how many times?
about 15 times.
Right. And you've had much more cases than that, haven't you?
Yes,
And this test has 49 questions, right?
yes,
And it has a validity scale in it, you say?
yes,
So that if an individual is making things up, this will pick it up, right?
doesn't always, but it's designed to try and do so, yes.
And so in this particular case, that's one of the things that you administered, right?
Yes.
You also administered, and you called it the Mylan test. Do you remember telling us that?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, what test? Is that the other test that
It
you
was the
administered?
Milan Clinical Multi-Axle Inventory, the MCMI-3,
And how many items are in this particular test?
175.
And with regard to administering this particular test, the way it works is there are questions, and the individual then makes a mark, correct?
Yes,
And this is the one that you actually sent to be scored, right?
yes.
The other one, the
PDS,
post-traumatic stress diagnostic scale test, that's the one that you scored yourself, right?
yes,
You sat down and you looked, and the way that one works is that there are 49 questions, right?
yes,
And then there's an answer sheet, right?
yes,
And then there's a round circle that's filled in for the answer, right?
yes,
And again, the validity of that test depends on the person answering that test accurately, right?
right,
And so, for example, let's say that the person lied on that test. Let's assume that that's what happened, okay? With
Yes.
regard to a PDS test. Wouldn't you agree that that would invalidate the results of the PDS test?
yes,
And if it were used for the post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis, that would be a faulty diagnosis, right?
yes,
Because it is used, if you will, as a way to confirm, right?
yes,
Well, in this case, isn't it true, sir, that with regard to this PDS, the defendant lied on it?
no, that's not true.
Sir, when was the last time that you reviewed your raw data involving this particular test?
A couple of days ago, last week.
Sir, let me have something here marked. This is exhibit number 533. And what a defendant fills out, both the test and the results, they're called the raw data, correct?
Yes.
And the raw data is not provided to attorneys, is it? Is it?
It can be.
It can be, but the code generally calls for it to be provided or to be transferred between psychologists, right?
Right.
And speaking of psychology, you're a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, right?
I'm a psychologist.
Right, which means that you did not go, there's no MD after your name, correct?
No, there is not.
So you showed us a diagram or something about the head. It's not like you can go in and do surgery, can you?
No,
And you cannot prescribe, right?
that's correct.
So take a look at Exhibit 533 and see whether or not this corresponds to the actual PDS, parts 1 and 2, as well as the responses by the defendant. Take a look at it. And if it doesn't, tell me how it doesn't.
Well, I'll have to look at my, my notes.
Sure, and in fact, when you take it out, if you don't mind giving it to me so that I can mark it.
I'm sorry?
Take it out of your folder so that I can mark the PDS test along with the raw data.
Oh, okay.
Do you have it out now, sir?
I have it out, yes.
If I may. So this is the worksheet, isn't it?
That's the worksheet.
Okay. But there's also a part of this test that includes the questions, doesn't it?
Yes.
If I could have that.
Here it is.
Well, sir, where are the directions for questions 1 through 15?
Oh, I don't have the actual, well, it's all in here, actually.
Well,
Sample of the test is in here with the questions and so forth.
okay, but where's the answer sheet to questions 1 through
At the time that I went, I didn't have an answer sheet, so I had to fill it out on a piece of blank paper, which I transcribed to an answer sheet.
Sir, do you remember providing the raw data to somebody by the name of Janine DeMarte?
Yes.
And you're saying that what you provided to her is a copy of the yellow sheet that you have there?
No, I provided to her the transferred sheet.
Right. In other words, you provided her a white sheet with little round circles
That's
that were
right.
filled in, right?
That's correct, yes.
Where is that?
I don't have it with me, apparently.
Well, why don't you have it with you?
I must have left it on my desk. Must
Sir,
have left it on my desk.
isn't it important to have a complete file so that you can answer whatever questions come up?
Well, I have the answers over here.
I'm not asking about the answers. I'm asking about the other portion of the test. The one that's got the little round circles that you provided to
Yes,
somebody
I
else.
did not bring that. What I brought was the original that she filled out, that I later transferred to the question because I didn't have the answer sheet with me when I went to see her.
So what you're saying is that you're the person then who filled out the answers to questions 1 through 15?
No, I have her answers here. What I did was transpose her answers onto the sheet for scoring.
I understand what you're trying to tell me, but my question to you is much more direct than that. In terms of the answer sheet itself, the little marks, the pencil marks that were done on there, that was done by you and not the defendant.
That's
right?
correct.
And sir, if it was done by you and you were going to score it yourself. Why did you use a pencil?
Why did I use a pencil?
Yes, instead of a pen.
Well, we traditionally use pencils when filling out forms such as that.
No, the reason you traditionally use pencils is because it's going to go through a computer and they're easily read that way, correct?
Yes, that's true.
And you can't use pens, or you don't use pens, because it's difficult for the computer to read them, right?
And also if you make an error, it's harder to change your answer.
But in this particular case, you were going to score it, right?
Yes.
So why go through all this trouble of using a pencil if you're going to score it when a pen provides better markings?
Objection, asked and answered. He already answered that it's typical for him to use a pencil.
Me.
I prefer to use a pencil.
And that's so that you can make some changes on it if you
Objection,
want?
argumentative.
Overruled.
So are you implying that I cheated on that test?
No, sir, I'm asking you some questions. However you want to take them is up to you. I'm just asking you some
Okay, ask me the
questions.
question again.
So the question, sir, is you chose not to use a pen. Instead, you chose to use a pencil, which is normally what a person who is taking this test uses, right?
Yes.
And you then sat down and you did conduct this particular test, right?
Yes.
Let me go ahead and have the yellow sheet, please. And if I may have the book, please. This is exhibit number 527. What does this contain, sir?
That is the manual that is associated with that test. It includes instruction manuals for scoring, sample answer sheet, sample worksheet, and some validation information.
I move for the admission of exhibit 527.
Objection, memory refresh.
More exhibits. Take a look at exhibit number 534. What is it?
.534 is a sheet of responses that Ms. Arias filled in, which I then transferred to the actual score sheet.
And what date was that?
this date here?
Yes, sir. Right in
Oh, the
front.
date that I administered, I have to
No,
go.
just, hold on.
Yeah.
Just show you where the date is, okay?
Okay, oh, 1/15/10,
All right, that's January 15th of 2010, correct?
yes,
And this is the original, right?
I believe, yes.
Good job. If I may have it stapled again. it'll be- I move for the admission of Exhibit 534.
Objection.
534. And so this test here, which was administered on January 15th of 2010, was before this was during the time that she was telling you the story about these two men, two individuals, a man and a woman, coming in and doing harm to Mr. Alexander, correct?
One moment, I'd just like to check something out.
All right. Why don't I have it marked so that you can take a look at your notes and we can maybe make it a little quicker.
Okay.
So take a look at Exhibit 536 and see if that refreshes your recollection as to administering the PDS and the fact that at the time that you administered the PDS, she was still telling you that it had been the intruders who had killed Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Okay? Let me have that back. And this test, this PDS test that you administered, the one that we have here with the answers, this test reflects the fact that her story is still the fact that it was two intruders that actually killed Mr. Alexander. Doesn't that reflect that?
Yes, if it was taken at that time, it would.
It did, didn't it? And in fact, the portion that you don't have in front of you would show us that that was in fact the case, right?
Yes.
Let's take a look at, you have mine up there, correct?
Yes.
And that, have you taken a look at it? Is that a copy that accurately reflects the answers in Exhibit 534 as to questions 1 through 15? And I'll give this to you.
Please. Yes.
Okay. Let me have that back. I move for the admission of exhibit number 533.
533 the actual, something that Dr. Samuels typed up or something that the state typed up?
It's a true and accurate copy of of that particular part of the test and the defendant's responses, according to Dr. Samuels.
That was his testimony.
I heard, okay. Well, I would object unless it's an actual copy that Dr. Samuels has.
Overruled. Exhibit 533 will be admitted.
Okay, so let's take a look at exhibit number 533. There are some instructions that go with this, right?
Yes.
And the instructions are part of this manual here, exhibit 527, right?
Yes.
And they're the ones that indicate what questions there are to be asked.
Yes.
And whatever the answers are, right?
Yes.
So with regard to the first question, the person who's taking this, in this case the defendant, is asked to identify whether or not any of these events, serious events, have occurred in their life.
Throughout
right?
their lifetime, correct.
Right, because these kinds of events are the kinds of events that trigger these responses that we've been talking about. Loss of memory, right?
Yes.
That trigger the foggy memory, right?
Yeah.
And, for example, the first one says, serious accident, fire, or explosion. For example, industrial, farm, car, plane, or boating accident. And the defendant answered yes to that one, right?
Correct.
With regard to number 2, natural disaster, for example, tornado, hurricane, flood, or major earthquake, the defendant also answered yes to that one, right?
Yes.
Number 3, she's asked about non-sexual assault by a family member or someone you know. When it talks about someone you know, it isn't talking about you. It's talking about somebody the defendant knows, right?
Yes.
And it says, for example, being mugged, physically attacked, shot, stabbed, or held at gunpoint by someone you know, right?
Yes.
And she said, with regard to that, yes, right?
Yes.
And then she says, number 4, non-sexual assault by a stranger, right?
Yes.
For example, being mugged, physically attacked, shot, stabbed, or held at gunpoint. It's the same question as above, number 3, only this one talks about a stranger, right?
Correct.
And she answered yes, right?
Yes.
Number 5, sexual assault by a family member or someone you know, for example, rape or attempted rape. She said no to that, didn't she?
Yes.
We heard testimony about issues from the defendant previously that she indicated something about a situation. I'm asking you whether you're familiar with a situation where she claims Mr. Alexander may have taken her clothes off and may have penetrated her. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And you characterized that one as a rape, didn't you?
Yes.
When we had our interview.
Yes.
But here, number 5, she says, no, it wasn't that, right?
Yes.
And between the two of you, she was there, right?
Yes.
And she would know better than you, right?
Correct.
Objection. Speculation.
Overruled.
6, sexual assault by a stranger, for example, rape or attempted rape, and she said no to that, right?
Yes.
7, military combat or a war zone, she said no, right?
Correct.
Number 8, sexual contact when you were younger than 18 with someone who was 5 or more years older than you, for example, contact with genital breast, and she said no, right?
Yes.
And then it says imprisonment, for example, prison inmate, prisoner at war, hostage, and she said no, right?
Correct.
Continues on with question 10, and question 10 asks about torture, and she said no, right?
Yes.
Number 11, life-threatening illness, she said no, right?
Correct.
With regard to 12, there is other traumatic event, and she says yes, right?
Yes.
And then she says number 13, if you answered yes to item 13 specifically, specify the traumatic event on the answer sheet, right?
Yes.
And she said repeated emotional and psychological abuse, right?
Yes.
Then this test goes on to part 2, right?
Yes.
And it is asking the individual who's taking this test, in this case the defendant, a question, right?
Yes.
And this is one of the guiding questions that determines or substantiates or confirms or helps you confirm the presence of PTSD, right?
Yes.
And in fact, the way you indicated were that, in your report, were that her scores on the post-traumatic stress disorder scale confirm the presence of PTSD, right?
Yes.
It says here, if you mark yes for more than one traumatic event in part 1, indicate which one bothers you the most. If you marked yes for only one traumatic event in part 1, mark the same one on the answer sheet, right?
Yes.
And she's asked about the same 12 questions that we've just gone over, right?
Yes.
And the one that she indicated was the traumatic event in her life that triggers this post-traumatic stress disorder is what? Why don't you read number 4?
Non-sexual assault, stranger.
Not somebody that she knows, right?
Correct.
You said that you reviewed the photographs of the crime scene, right?
Yes.
And you talked about Mr. Alexander being in that shower, right?
Yes.
He's not a stranger, is he?
No.
He's somebody that she knew, right?
Yes.
And it's talking about that the thing that triggers it for her, this PTSD, is non-sexual assault by a stranger, correct?
Correct.
And the rest of the questions that you have here in Exhibit 534, all of the answers here, are based on the fact that she had an assault by a stranger, right?
That's what she said in that test.
Well, no, let's go back to this just so we make sure. 533. It says, why don't you read it for me?
Below
And make sure that I can bring it in, the whole thing. Okay?
Below are several questions about the traumatic event you marked in item 14. Non-sexual assault, stranger.
And these are the questions that I have in my right hand, right? These are the answers, right?
Yes.
This is her worksheet, right?
That's right.
Did you turn this worksheet, a copy of this worksheet over to Janine DeMarte?
Yes.
And this is a true and accurate, or this is the actual item that the defendant filled out, right?
Yes.
Take a look at it. 535.
Yes.
I move for the omission of Exhibit 535.
You may. 535 is admitted.
And sir, with regard to Exhibit 535, you said this is what the defendant filled out, right?
Can I see that? I'm not sure
Sure.
whether she did or I did. No, I did.
And
Judge, may we approach?
Yes.
sir, with regard to Exhibit 534, this contains the answers to it, right?
Yes.
For example, 534, you said this is the one that the defendant filled out, right?
No, I don't remember.
Well,
can I see
sir,
that?
let me do it this way.
Okay.
Isn't it true that previously you told us that this is the one that the defendant filled out, right?
I believe so.
And isn't it true that you said that whatever markings are on here are those of the defendant, right?
Well, those are in my hand.
Okay,
I
so,
believe. At least part of it is.
so for example, Part 2, where it says circle numbers that apply, that's your writing, circle numbers that apply, right?
Yes, that's my writing.
And under 14, it does circle number 4, right?
Yes.
Did you circle that or did she circle that?
I honestly don't recall, but I think she circled it, or she gave me the number and I circled it. I don't recall.
And then, down at the bottom of it, you say expands for assault, life-threatening, right?
Right.
And that was important to you. That's why you wrote it, right?
Right.
She didn't write that down there, right?
No, I wrote that.
And this is an assault that's life-threatening by a stranger, right?
That's what she said at the time.
Well, that's when you filled out this test, right? So that's
Yes,
what-
that's what she was saying at the time.
And one of the things that you told us previously on direct examination was that, well, in terms of what she was telling you, you believed that she wasn't telling you the truth initially. Do you remember telling us
Yes,
that?
that's correct.
Yet you administer this test and you write these notations down, even though you believe those are not true, right?
That's true.
Why are you writing down untruths?
Because this was her perception at the time. This was her story of what went on at the time. The test was administered. These were her responses.
But you used it. You just said, knowing that this was a lie, you used it and then concluded that those scores on that PDS confirm the presence of PTSD, even though you've just now told us that this is based on a lie.
Perhaps I should have re-administered that test.
Because this is one of the foundations for your finding of post-traumatic stress disorder on the defendant, right?
Correct.
And the other one is the MCMI, right?
Correct.
The other test, right? As well as your conversation with her, right?
Correct.
So let's take a look at the one that you have up there.
The worksheet.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My question is, with regard to 535, why are you filling this out and not her? Why do you feel that you have the need to, for example, in item 16 through 19, let's talk about those. Why do you have to fill in the number here? Do you see that?
Yes.
Well, couldn't she do that herself?
No, this is for the examiner to fill out after reviewing the answer sheet. This is called a hand scoring worksheet.
Oh, so this is the score that you actually did on it, correct?
That's right. That's the scoring of her raw data.
So when you told me before that this was actually her answers, that was a mistake then?
Well, there is an answer sheet, which I have. It's probably on my desk, but that is very similar in appearance. But it's a printed form, which is what I transferred her data to. And then I scored from my transferred sheet.
And this scoring is done with reference to a guide, correct?
A reference to a scoring guide, yes.
Right. And you give it a number, right? That's what
Yes.
And based on that number, that tells you, yes, this is a measure that can be used in support of PTSD or not, right?
Correct.
Exhibit number 534. Question number 22. You see that? There's a number there, right?
Yes.
Where's the guide that tells us why you would have to, question number 22, give her a 3?
Well, I didn't give her a 3. She scored a 3. And there is a scale on the actual answer sheet where you circle 0, 1, 2, or 3. In the manual that you have over there, it explains precisely how to do this.
So what you're talking about is exhibit 527, right?
That's correct.
So she put a 3 in response to the question, whatever the question
Whatever
was,
the
right?
item was, yes.
The question that you don't have in front of you.
Well, yeah, the questions are in the book.
Okay? Exhibit 527. Question 22. Read that one for us.
The instructions are for item number 22.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Okay, wait. There is the exact directions are here. Okay. That's not the right one. Okay. I guess maybe this doesn't have it. Hold on one second. I guess the actual test is not here, and I had everything together. Wait, hold on. All right, there is a question booklet, a booklet that
Right.
comes with this, which I thought was attached in this book, but it isn't, and it explains to the individual how to score these particular items, and then it has a separate answer sheet. If I don't have that with me here, I apologize. I could certainly bring it tomorrow, but I don't have, apparently I don't have it here. Some pages must
So
have
that's not
gotten
the
lost in my file.
What you have in front of you is not the guide to score number 535 as you
It's, right, it's not the actual question sheet that is used for this.
Right, it's
I
not
thought
the
it was
guide,
in
right.
here, but apparently it's not.
So what is that then that you have in front of you? What is it?
This is the manual. This tells you how to score it. It tells you about the validity of the test. It describes sample reports, but apparently it doesn't have the actual questions. And I had that together with the original answer sheet, and I'm afraid I left it home.
All right, if I may have that back.
Yeah.
If we take a look at page number 2 of exhibit number 534, question number 16,
Yes.
17, 18, and 19. Do you see that?
Yes.
Those are yeses, right?
Correct.
So it's 16, 17, 18, and 19. Those are 4 check marks, right?
Yes.
How come on this, and you filled out 535?
That is the hand scoring sheet.
This is the one you said you filled out.
May I? Yes, this is the hand scoring sheet.
If I may have it back. Why was there a 6 there present at first, and then you changed it?
I added them up incorrectly.
This test, sir, like all tests, is a situation where you sit down, involves a situation where you sit down with the defendant and you indicate to them that you're going to administer a test, right?
Correct.
And you provide them the materials with which to make answers, correct?
Correct.
You give them the instructions, right?
Yes.
And then there's a period of time within which this test must be answered, right?
Well, there's no time limit on this test.
How long did the defendant take to fill this out?
20 minutes or so?
But if she wanted to take more, she could have, correct?
Correct.
And during that time, she never manifested any indication to you that she didn't understand any of the questions, correct?
That's correct.
For example, exhibit number 533 that talks about the traumatic event, non-sexual assault by a stranger, never indicated any compunction or any reservation or reluctance in while you were there administering it, in filling that out, correct?
Correct.
And what you are telling me is that the validity or this test really is only as good as the person who is telling or filling it out, right?
That's true.
So if they're lying, then the test is not very good.
That's correct.
And in this case, we do have a circumstance where you know the defendant's lying and she lied on the test, right?
Well, her answers didn't reflect what we ultimately discovered.
Right, so she lied, right?
Yes, or her answers may have been consistent with the story
Well-
she was telling.
Well, 533, question number 14, the answer, that's a lie.
Question number 4 or 14, did you say?
Well, it's question 14.
Oh, 14 above. Oh, I see. Okay. Yes.
And she was given many choices, including right above there, non-sexual assault by someone she knew, right?
Yes.
So that is a lie, right?
Yes. It's, well, again.
Oh, hold on, sir.
Oh, sorry.
For a moment. Approach, please. May I continue?
And after this testing was done and after this answer was given, and I'm just asking about you, I'm not asking about anybody else, there was a subsequent meeting, yes or no, right?
Could you repeat that?
After this was administered, this test, 533,
Yes.
there was a subsequent meeting, right?
Afterwards, yes.
Yes. And during this subsequent meeting is when the story changed correct?
Correct.
And during that story change, one of the things that the defendant told you was that this story about the strangers was fiction, correct?
That's correct.
And that, in fact, she had been the one to actually kill Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
And yet you did not administer another PDS, correct?
That was an oversight, and I should have done that.
And, sir, one of the other things is that during this conversation, or during your meetings with the defendant, you and she talked about a number of things, didn't you?
Well, sure.
In fact, one of the things that you talked to us about during direct examination was specifically the rope at the crime scene. Do you remember answering questions about that?
Yes.
Isn't it true, sir, that one of the things that the defendant told you about that rope was that she was tied at the hands, right?
Yes.
And she also told you that she was tied at the ankles. Didn't she tell you that?
Well, that's what I had in my notes.
No, I'm not asking you what you had in your notes. I'm asking you whether or not that's what she told you.
I don't remember what she told me.
Well, you have notes, though, right?
But I do have notes.
And those notes are made at exactly the time that she is relating that to you, correct?
That's correct.
And those notes reflect on two occasions, on two separate parts, that she was tied down at the hands and the ankles, right?
That's what my notes reflect, yes.
And there's no reason for us to doubt your notes, right?
No, there aren't. The
Because-
one thing, the fact is that most of the time over the years when people have said they've used rope, they tie the hands and the ankles. It is conceivable that in my attempt to write down quickly as she's talking, I may have added that by mistake, but I don't remember. So you have to go with what I wrote.
So are you confessing or saying that you were wrong in writing that down?
I don't know.
So, but isn't that the notes, isn't that what forms partly, isn't that part of the clinical interview?
Yes, it is.
And isn't that part of what has formed your conclusion that she was afflicted with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes.
And so, don't you think that would be important to make sure that you were accurate?
The formulation of the post-traumatic stress disorder came about after a careful analysis of the notes, the crime scene material, and her changed story. These tests, which I had administered earlier, did confirm the presence of post-traumatic stress disorder, although I was in error by not re-administering the PDS.
And I'm not talking about those tests. We'll talk about that probably tomorrow, but I'm talking about the statement to you from her that she was tied both at the hands and also at the ankles.
Yes. Well, that's what I wrote.
And there's no reason, as we sit here today, to doubt that, right?
No.
And one of the other things that she told you was that even though when this was going on and she was tied down, that it was actually Mr. Alexander, when this was happening, that he actually cut the ropes as he approached Climax, correct?
Yes.
And he used a knife to cut the ropes, right?
Yes.
And then, as he approached Climax, she straddled him or got on top of him, right?
Yes.
And while she was on top of him, that's when Mr. Alexander took the photographs, the nude photographs,
That's
right?
correct, yes.
Okay? I want you to take a look at exhibits 164, 165, 168, and 169.
Okay.
Those are photographs of Miss Arias, correct?
Yes.
And those are the photographs of her sprawled or laying back on the bed, correct?
Yes.
It also shows a picture of her vaginal area, correct?
Yes.
And it also shows a picture of her backside, right?
Yes.
In none of those pictures, Mr. Alexander appears in none of those pictures, correct?
Correct.
Those are the pictures, sir, that were, well, did you ever see or look at these pictures after after you talked to Miss Arias and you received the story about the pictures being taken while she was straddling him?
I saw some pictures, but I don't believe I've seen all of them.
So don't you think it would have been important to look at those photographs so that you could see if you could corroborate what she was telling you at that time was happening?
Actually, I had the photographs when I first began the case. It would have been helpful to corroborate, yes.
And that wasn't done in this case,
No.
correct? And if you would have looked at those, that would have provided you an opportunity to ask her about this particular issue, right?
Yes.
Since that's part of what goes into this post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis, looking at what somebody tells you and whether or not it can be corroborated, right?
Well, I didn't see a major contribution to her post-traumatic stress disorder as a function of the sexual life that they were having.
But if somebody is a liar over and over with something like that, don't you think that that's something you would consider?
Objection is a characterization as someone being a liar. That's certainly not what Dr. Samus has agreed to.
Approach, please.
So, hypothetically speaking, isn't it important if you have someone who you are assessing, if they lie to you over and over again, isn't it important to corroborate things?
I didn't view the story she was telling as a lie.
No, I'm not asking you about this case. I'm asking generally speaking, sir.
The information that I get in a case can be corroborated to some degree.
No, but my question, sir, is if someone, not this case, generally speaking, in your experience, all these years that you've had, if someone is constantly lying to you, not this case, if someone is constantly lying to you, don't you think it's important to attempt to corroborate what they're telling you?
If I knew someone was constantly
Yes.
lying to me, I would discontinue the evaluation because it wouldn't be worthwhile in continuing it.
Oh, so you wouldn't corroborate, you would just discontinue it then, right?
If I knew somebody was lying consistently, what would be the point of me to continue either with therapy or with an evaluation?
What if they only lied 3 or 4 times that you knew of? Would that make a
If
difference?
I was able to corroborate that, of course I would.
With regard to these photographs, our information, or you can see on there the date and the time.
Right.
Give me a date and
6408,
at what time? Give us a time.
1:42 p.m.
At that time, sir, according to your assessment, she was not suffering any of these foggy memories then, was she?
To my knowledge, that's true.
Oh, no, you're the one that told us when she was. Do you remember you did the graph?
The foggy memory occurred at the time of the killing.
Right. So at that point, she was not having any memory problems, right?
Correct?
And she wasn't foggy, right?
Correct.
So that if that's an inconsistency, it cannot be attributed to her having a foggy memory, correct?
That's true.
Speculation.
I don't have anything else, thank you. Well, I mean, pursuant to what we talked about, I don't have anything else today.
All right. Objection is overruled. The answer will stand. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the evening recess. Please be back in the designated area. Can everyone be here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock? Have a nice evening. You are excused. Please remember the admonition. record will show the jury has left the courtroom. We are in recess. Dr. Samuels, you may step down.
Thank you.